So let's get straight into it. So to quickly introduce myself, uh, Astrid Sapphire, I work as a Principal Product Success Manager within the Finance and Supply Chain business unit, working with lovely customers such as yourselves joining on the call today. I've been working with ServiceNow for about 7 years. I've worked as a customer, a partner, and an employee. And I've also been sort of coming from a developer background primarily and into architecture as well. So I've actually been awarded the MVP in the developer community twice over my time, and also that image on the slide there is from winning the Knowledge 2023 hackathon, which was definitely a highlight for myself there. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining in today. I like to level set what we're going to talk about, with what value it really presents. You're bringing an hour of your time into this session. I think it's really important that we clarify and communicate sort of what is this going to be and what can you take away from this. And the key components are around how Agentic AI and Now Assist come together, really level setting and making sure we've got a shared basis of understanding of these capabilities, how to identify what use cases suit agentic and generative AI, as well as how to measure the value of using those and implementing those, how to enable both our out-of-the-box skills, particularly, of course, in source to pay, as well as how to approach introducing custom skills or custom agentic workflows as well. Lastly, we want to talk about the process to turn these on and some of the ways that you can look to be implementing these if that's something that you've currently got or you're thinking about procuring down the track as well. Something I always like to cover, sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of my drink. Something I always like to cover is the safe harbor slide. Now, I don't expect there to be any forward-looking statements in this presentation. However, if there are any that are forward-looking, we will explicitly call that out as such. So not to scare anyone by having this one up here, we're going to be talking about current capability that's out with the Zurich release and our October store release, but just safer than sorry for any questions that might come up through the Q&A as well. Alrighty. So for our agenda today, action-packed, like I said, while we're getting started now, what we're going to cover is the building blocks of Now Assist, moving into Now Assist for source-to-pay operations and what actually comes under the proverbial hood of Now Assist when it's for source-to-pay, how you define your different value and use cases for Agentic AI, moving into how we enable and build with a demonstration of turning that on and using that, as well as learning from the process of doing so. And then closing out with a little section on how you can start to look at experimenting with this technology, taking advantage of some of our ServiceNow University courses, and how to measure that value and communicate with us as well. Let's start with the building blocks of Now Assist. Now, at the core, we have, of course, the ServiceNow platform. Now, we're now calling it the ServiceNow AI platform. We've, of course, got a data model that is really designed to span and grow across the enterprise. We've got our source-to-pay specific data model, but of course, we've got the same platform with the same database holding ITSM information, employee information, and all of that other information across your different core business workflows, as well as the broader enterprise at large. We've got that aligned, of course, with the workflow engine, the powerhouse behind ServiceNow, the ability to integrate, and these spokes that we've already got to integrate with other platforms, as well as AI capabilities, which we've been working with well prior to, of course, the massive explosion that was ChatGPT 3, 4, and so on. We've also then got these concepts of small and large language models. So language models at their core are the not-so-secret sauce behind generative AI capabilities, whether it be purely generative context or the level up that we've got in terms of agentic AI. These are models that will be comprised of millions at the smaller scale through to trillions of different data points worth of information. So we're talking internet scale context. We, of course, might have heard of web crawling across Google and other resources to get all of that information together. These models are really what allows us to predict the next word that then comes together into the prompt responses that we are familiar with in generative AI. That's then wrapped together with the generative AI controller. Within ServiceNow, that is a platform, you can think of it like a hub that allows customers to interact with any language model that they so choose to use. We ship several model connectors out of the box at ServiceNow, as well as our own OEM integrations with them that you can get through Now Assist. But customers are also able to bring their own keys for their own sort of API integration with those services, and even create their own integration with their own internal language models if they've developed those, or otherwise different smaller vendors that might be new and upcoming in the market and not yet have an integration. Now that we've got these foundations set, we move into the core inputs that you provide to a language model. I've used LLM here because large language models is generally what we're seeing in terms of Gemini, ChatGPT, and the like. The next piece of that puzzle, of course, is then prompts and context, the information that you feed into an LLM. So prompts are going to be the instructions at a core that you provide to elicit a response from a large language model. That's what you're going to be asking ChatGPT about, or Copilot if you're using it there, but it is fundamentally the instruction that goes to the LLM to elicit the response. When we talk about some of these other technologies, there are different layers that sit on top of the pure prompt there as well. Context, on the other hand, is information that is provided as effectively the fundament on which that prompt can respond. So these are pre-trained models. All of these, ChatGPT, Gemini, all of the rest, they come as what we call pre-trained models. But context that you provide into that then closes the gap between the pre-trained internet scale worldwide context and enterprise-specific or organization-specific outputs. Context, of course, going back to our data model and workflow conversations, is where ServiceNow really shines with that single data model and integration capability there as well. Now, the next level up is skills. So skills effectively operate as a wrapper or sort of a bucket within which those prompts and contexts and other information can sit. They're the core mechanism that we use in ServiceNow to trigger generative AI actions, with hundreds of different skills shipped by our different product teams across the platform, and approximately 20 unique skills in source to pay as of October. They function as a wrapper that allows us to determine, say, different prompts to different LLMs within a single skill, within a single entity, allowing you to choose which LLM you want to use. You can also set different configs within those. Really, the skill is the level above the pure prompt and the pure context that allows you to trigger that within ServiceNow, while also remaining secure and not passing instructions directly to the LLM that could be susceptible to things like prompt injection. Customers can build their own skills or leverage our out-of-the-box skills, and additionally, they can copy those out-of-the-box skills to refine and replace based on the outcomes you're looking for. The next level, again, is where we start to get into our agentic capabilities with tools and agents. Agents combine skills and those underlying tools within the platform in order to achieve an outcome. In ServiceNow, your tools could be a flow designer flow, a topic within virtual agent, a script, a database query or retrieval of data, and so on. By enhancing those skills and giving the tools to your agents, what you're effectively doing is moving from use cases like purely summarizing and responding to text, generating or reasoning based on information, to taking an action out of those decisions. The other thing to note, and we'll touch on it shortly, is when you define an AI agent, what you do is you provide a description of the responsibilities and actions it can perform and when to use it. You'll be able to trigger an agent directly via automation if you're looking to, but there is also the ability to trigger them through an agentic workflow. On that note, agentic workflows are the sort of last piece of that puzzle there, building out our pyramid, building out our table of information. An agentic workflow at its core is a team or a band I like to think of with a conductor at the top. When you trigger an agentic workflow, you trigger that conductor, that overarching workflow to determine which of its band members, its group of AI agents, should be used. When you're thinking about an agentic workflow, it's pretty much a use case. And in fact, in the database, we call it an agentic use case. When you think about these, think of it as equivalent to a workflow. We'll see some examples that ServiceNow ships at the moment in a couple of slides, but if you want a workflow that, say, handles supplier engagement inquiry, then you'll need an agent or multiple agents that can do different components of handling an inquiry. So gathering the information, generating a response to that, whatever the case might be. And those descriptions we provided earlier for our AI agents are how the agentic workflow can determine that this is the right party to go to resolve this. Using those, as well as those descriptions, you also provide that description at the overall layer of the agentic workflow, so it knows what it's responsible for and the bounding constraints for how it should operate as well. Of course, it wouldn't be complete if we didn't quickly talk about the overarching governance, safety, and value of that solution. So a key component and the value of doing this all within the ServiceNow platform is the ability to have reporting and guardrails on those individual prompts or those individual skill operations, those agentic workflow evaluations. You can also take advantage and use tools like the Now Assist Guardian, which can block and identify explicit language that might be prompted in. Somebody's swearing in a case description because they're really agitated about something, or prompt injection as well, to make sure we're avoiding any of those risks of data polluting the intent of that. And we've also got Now Assist Analytics and the AI Control Tower, which are different lenses through which we can start reporting on those different executions and make sure we can measure, based on those executions, along with our understanding of the value of that use case, the impact that those solutions are having. Now that we understand Now Assist at its core, I really want to talk to how Now Assist and Agentic AI comes together within Source to Pay. Now, this is our library so far, and I want to indicate so far because this is a rapidly evolving area within the platform. This is as of our October release. We can see a variety of different skills over here on the left, and then those agentic flows and agents on the right there as well. We have, and something you'll see a lot with different skills across the ecosystem is we'll have a few different skill types even that you might see. So we've got our summarization ones, really improving the time to action there by saving time and effort for your agents or your employees to quickly get them up to speed around a supplier, a case, a purchase order, and so on. We've got our multi-term catalog ordering, giving us the capability to go through and identify what somebody is looking to order and then capture that into a purchase requisition and start actioning based off of that as well. We've then got specific invoice-related ones, such as our invoice data extraction and purchase order line mapping as well. And I won't read through every single line, but you can see all of these incredible capabilities that have come out so far. On the right side, we've got our agentic flows and agents, but what I'd like to do is move into some individual slides that I've got on each of those. Before I do, I just want to quickly highlight on that resolve supplier questions one. For customers that are installing from Zurich onwards, you might notice that we have actually consolidated the capabilities that were happening in the resolve supplier questions agentic workflow into a single AI agent, invoice resolution provider. This doesn't take away that core capability at all, but it's just a key highlight that we have moved to that level down to try and give that same capability while making sure that we're keeping that efficient for our customers there as well. Really quickly, so this use case is largely pointed, as you can tell from the name, towards our SPO product in sourcing and procurement, really supporting employees to get to the right type of record, the right outcome based off of their what they're asking from the organization, as opposed to having to handhold them as procurement or as sourcing through the process of identifying what supplier is currently there, what product models are available to me that I can then go and procure from that supplier. The agentic workflow here takes us through the steps of procuring that item, asking the right questions to make sure that if it's something that's not currently on catalog, that we can identify that and take those right steps forward from there. We've got coordinate supplier onboarding sitting, of course, tied into our supplier lifecycle operations capabilities, really supporting the process of onboarding our suppliers with additional AI capabilities, as opposed to having to swivel chair or dig through different records within the platform, making sure we can generate and aggregate the different information needed, the different requirements from that supplier, validate that the information provided is what we need, and then move forward to those approvals as well. Onto resolve supplier questions, which with the supplier, you might read that as sitting in the supplier space. Of course, this is our accounts payable operations one that I mentioned earlier. We've consolidated that into that single AI agent. The goal here is really to improve the experience for your suppliers as well as for your employees by giving that direct visibility, those getting the correct resolutions and providing those back to improve the time to resolution for those supplier inquiries there, particularly around your invoice cases. Alrighty, I'm just going to take a quick sip of my drink again. Moving forward, I really want to take an opportunity to talk about value and use cases. Now, one of the key things that we need to consider is really going to be where to use our agentic AI and generative AI capabilities and how to measure that we are getting value out of those, that we are driving things in the correct direction there. Pardon me. So, there are a few different elements that help to feed a agentic or an AI use case to identify that it is really the right fit for it. I've got 4 of those different lenses here. There is more than that. This is not an exhaustive list, but these are the key things that we recommend starting to understand when you go to identify a use case that makes sense to use agentic AI with. You can see, of course, we've got those 3 that we've already identified at a broad level, impacting a lot of customers. And what we've looked at in those is these elements. So really you want to make sure that it is something that you're okay with what we call deterministic outcomes. So instead of going for so we've got probabilistic versus deterministic. Probabilistic means that we've got a probability of getting slightly different outcomes each time. Deterministic, on the other hand, is every time I want to execute this, I want a deterministic output. That in the ServiceNow platform is where things like our workflow automation, our flow designer, our playbooks can really shine. However, generative AI, you might have seen prompts or examples on the internet of how many R's are in strawberry, or how many different, how to add 2 plus 2 and get 5 or 3. That's because these technologies are really designed around taking the input and transforming to get the next best word and the next best contexts into that response there. So as long as you understand that you're really looking for a probabilistic, something that you can provide sufficient context to get the right area of answers, but you're okay that the words might be slightly different between how that's communicated. Your specific context, and that's the key thing, is you don't want to ask super open-ended questions. You don't want to have a super open-ended use case that you might have wildly varying responses back to that probabilistic component. You want to make sure that you're getting really clear on what the responsibility of a specific skill or a specific agent is going to be. Moving into your clear goals, making sure you've got your target insight and are directing towards that in terms of what this agent or agentic capability will do. And the most important bit is the defined process to understand what different components of that workflow are required, what different agents you'll be able to define out of that are going to really be needed to make sure that you can action that process and that you've got the right agents and the right understanding to get the best outcome for your process. Now that we've talked a little bit about identifying those use cases, I wanted to quickly touch on identifying value back to your organization. So, of course, whenever we go through and procure a platform like ServiceNow or these agentic capabilities, we'll all be talking about the different values, the total cost of ownership, and the resolution back to my organization. One of the really key things, of course, is to identify and measure your before state of a process that you're hoping to transform through agentic AI, and then measure how that improves over time. I've just pulled up a couple of examples that we talk about at a broad level on the slides here in terms of where you might be able to get value within these different procurement, supplier, and payment processes. These are not the be-all and end-all, but these are really examples to start getting you thinking about what are those key indicators, what are those key items that I'm looking to identify and get out of this solution, and how does using this underlying tool help me get that value or incrementally drive towards it with an underlying outcome as well. So I think it's really key that value be central to that conversation, because it helps you both to make sure you're implementing the right use cases, but also that those use cases continue to give you value over time and feed into that overall return on investment of the solution and in return on investment of doing these processes as well. Alrighty, so we've just reached the half-hour mark. What I'd like to do now is pivot into a demonstration in one of my instances, so that we can go through the process of enabling both a skill, but then into an agentic use case and the agentic workflows underneath those, as well as showing how we could copy and then enhance upon those, like I was talking about, to take one of those out of the box, one size fits most solutions and tailor that with additional workflows that I might want to trigger within my platform, or whatever the case might be there. Alrighty, so just quickly confirming that is viewable now. Perfect. Alrighty. So first things first, level setting with where we're at and what version we're on. So logged into one of my instances here, configured the same way a customer instance would be. So going through installing those plugins and configuring the data on top of that. I've got some of our demo data installed that we can refer to in there as well. just to help assist with building out the data that I might need for my suppliers, for my different entities in there. So we're on the Zurich release, and we're also on our October releases of the Now Assist applications. So we've got, of course, all of source to pay, but also our Now Assist for finance and supply chain, accounts payable operations, supply lifecycle operations, and sourcing and procurement operations. Perfect. Now, if I were to go from here and I was looking to start leveraging skills that I've procured or that I'm looking to use within source to pay, one of the first things I would do as an administrator on the platform would be to go into our Now Assist admin experience. This is a workflow and a workspace that will help our admins to identify what skills need to be enabled, what actions need to be taken, as well as what plugins am I entitled for that I can take advantage of in Now Assist. I've done some of the pre-configuration in terms of enabling our different Now Assist panel, as well as the other components of setting up my model and opting in and out of data sharing there as well. So what I'll now be able to go and do is go and identify a skill that I'd like to enable within Now Assist. Coming in here, I'll go into Now Assist skills, which you can see up here, and then I'll go to the finance and supply chain drop down here. I know I've got those plugins already installed, so what I'd like to do now is identify which of the skills available within these apps I would like to enable. Sorry, pardon me. As we can see, I've already enabled a large set of those across these different items here. But from that same list we were looking at earlier in the slides, I just wanted to quickly refer and show those same skills again showing throughout here. In this case, what I'm going to go and do is enable our supplier summarization for fulfillers. In order to make sure I don't have any scope issues between different contexts that these might be operating in, I'm going to quickly change into the common scope here, and I'm going to go in and start the process of enabling this skill. Now that the skill is here, what I want to do is go in and activate. Now, I've been through some of these configuration components before, but I'm going to redo each of those here. What we've got is the general details. So this is a skill that ServiceNow shipped, so you'll notice a fair few components that aren't editable. They are, however, able to be copied and enhanced upon. So what I do is I go into this one, I'd start from general details, saving and continuing. I'd identify what my input information is. Again, this is an out-of-the-box skill, but we can see the different inputs that feed into then summarizing a supplier. So our input data is our active suppliers in this case. We're looking for their legal name, whether they've been onboarded, our relationship status with them, the date that they were onboarded, as well as their Duns and Bradstreet number as well. Going through, I can actually go and test that against different suppliers that exist within my instance. So if I were to test against this supplier here, what I'm able to do is run that test, play some hold music while we wait. No, what we've got here is the result from that tested input there. So I can see a huge amount of different information that has come out of that prompt. Of course, this being a demonstration environment, I don't necessarily have all my KPIs or my risk data in there. And as you can see, we haven't had any recent contracts with them or any different procurement that we've done or done something there, for example. If this were a custom skill or one that I'd copied to enhance, I'd also be able to go in and edit the prompt. We'll do that shortly for another one here. So what we're going to do, save and continue now that we've tested that that's working as expected. We're now going to look at defining the availability of that one. Now, rule of thumb is you'll almost always want this to be available because you're tying it to a certain user roles who are allowed to access this. However, what you could do is introduce certain conditions, and those are conditions about your supplier as well. So if our supplier is active, wasn't a sufficient indicator. If I only want to be running this against suppliers that are from a specific country, as part of a pilot, what I'd be able to do is come in and customize that skill availability so that it only runs for certain countries that I select there that exist within my data model, or whatever the case might be. I'll just go skill is always available for now. Going from define availability, we go into define access. So this is the underlying security model that allows us to ensure which users or which roles we want to be able to trigger this. This is a fulfiller-based skill for summarizing suppliers, so we can see that we have our general analysis fulfiller role here that allows us to provide this access to that role. If I wanted to include more specific roles, I might create a specific supplier summarizer role and instead edit this one so that I identify that role instead. Moving forward, this is one of the key components that you want to make sure that you've enabled when going through the process of setting these up, is you want to select where it will display. So in this case, I want to display this on my supplier records, and I want that to display within our source to pay workspace. That's what's meant here by in product desktop. There is also, of course, down analysis panel, but in this case, we're looking for in product desktop, which will put that within our workspace. And we can also double check, here's another level of that role checking and validation, where I might change this role to be looking for specific administrators or other specific individuals with a higher level of access to be able to do that. By default, that is going to be the same role that we have had earlier. We can see this here as well, that it is based on that those roles that were listed in define access just before. And lastly, we quickly review what we've done. So we've gone through that process, identified those different elements of the skill, and now we're able to go ahead and activate that. And that's it. That's as easy as configuring these can be. What you then want to go through and do is do your test validations that it's working as expected. You'll go to different supplier records, giving people those roles first, of course, and validate that you're seeing the sort of outcomes you're expecting. But from there, you're then able to start moving through those different environments and look towards releasing that skill and getting that information directly to your fulfillers. The value of this one, for example, might be that instead of having to look at 10 different contract records, to look at 5 different PRs and POs that have gone out recently, and whatever other records that exist within my platform, I've now had that information retrieved and summarized for me, saving minutes worth of time or even longer potentially, depending on where that different data sits, of time for your employees to then act from there with that supplier or with records related to it as well. So that's a really exciting thing. These are really quick and easy to go and turn on and then start taking action from there. I mentioned quickly as well the ability to tailor these to suit what you're looking for. So if this solution, I also wanted to pull in an additional bit of information, what I might choose to do is go through, select this one here and make a copy. That would create a different version of this, as we can see the description here, with potentially different inputs and prompts based on the configuration that I take. So if I were to be customizing this for my organization, we can see I've already copied that and I'm able to start going through the process of building out my inputs if I wanted to change those, the prompt, so on and so forth as well. I won't go completely through that because skills are, of course, only half of the story as we build up into our prompt as well. We can see, however, that the platform saves that progress that I already did, so I'll be able to go back to that and continue to improve that as well. Now, what I'd like to quickly move to now is a different experience that lets us interact with our AI agents. So now I want to go into our AI Agent Studio, which we can see from the filter navigator up here under all. By putting in agent, AI agent, I'll be able to see that one there. Going in via the overview, we can see, of course, our guided tour to get us started. And we can see a whole bunch of information is already being shown and provided here for me to work with. So what I want to do is go in and look at the agentic workflows available to me, as well as the AI agents. So we talked about this in the slides earlier. I might go to create and manage here up at the top. Otherwise, I could use those same lists from overview. Now, you just tell it to not do that again. We go into view all here. That will take us to the same underlying lists. Now we can see I've installed a few different plugins here, but for simplicity, I'm going to right-click on the header of application here and group by application. Alrighty, so we've got our two workflows that we talked about. So this is our SPO-related workflow as well as our SLO-related workflow as well. You can see that the SPO one is using a team of 3 agents, while in Supplier onboarding, we're only using the one there. Now, if you're wanting to go and interact with those workflows, what you do is you click into those individual records. We can see that I need to change my scope here to make sure I'm in the right scope for SPO. I'm just going to quickly do that. And what I can do is go through, and this is the process I would take to go through and enable this workflow here. We can see, as I mentioned before, we're starting to describe our overall workflow and the steps that it's going to take within that workflow. So we've got our description that this AI agent workflow will assist those users to fill their procurement needs and the steps that it would take. We've got a single step here and the actions that it wants to take. You can see this is quite descriptive because it forms part of the instructions that the large language model will interact with. We can see those individual agents that are available to that. We can start to see those descriptions in there as well, and I'll quickly click to those at the moment. But we can see we've got those 3 different items that it can choose from depending on the description and depending on the input or the conversational request that's come through as well. We can see that this is going to run as the user that is triggering this. So instead of worrying about my security model, that I might see different things based on different individuals, by setting this dynamic user here, this AI agent is running with the same restrictions and controls that user would have as themselves directly. So the person who's triggering it is only getting the results they should have. Going through, we've got our right agents associated. We now want to make sure that we can set our trigger based on what we're looking to do. Now, there's a few different ways you can trigger agentic workflows. This workflow, for example, doesn't need a direct trigger here because it is designed to be triggered through our Now Assist for Virtual agent. So in this case, I don't need to add a predefined trigger, but with our supplier onboarding or our invoice case agent, we would set those triggers up for those use cases there. So I'm just going to save and continue for this one. And then I'll also identify what UIs I want this to display in. Now, in this case, again, this one is designed to be triggered from virtual agent, so we don't need to enable it in the Now Assist panel. Now Assist panel, of course, being what is displayed to a fulfiller in this platform view here. Once I go through, I can save and test executing that item, and I can go in and start to write my request, my information that I need to trigger that output there as well. What we're going to do, though, one of the three ones, and I talked about those different ways of triggering these agentic workflows. I want to take an opportunity to look at a different scope here and look at our AI agent from accounts payable operations, which of course is our invoice resolution provider. Again, I'm going to make sure, because I'm working with multiple different apps at the same time, I'm always making sure that I'm in the right scope so that any changes I make are going to be in that correct scope. Going back to my AI agent list here, I've got my invoice resolution provider. In this case, I'm going to click into that one so I can start looking at that item itself. Of course, my UI is misbehaving here and I'm seeing the new page. So what I might do is select a different one from one of the other scopes. So what we'll do is we'll go into SPI. We'll look actually at SLI. We'll go into the data validation AI agent. Apologies, I've got a little bit of a problem here in opening the AI agent page. So what I'll do is I'll go back to the agentic workflow. What that can happen sometimes when you're not using necessarily the latest version of those different studio or developer environments. So a key thing to check, and one that I didn't check prior to joining this call, was whether there's been a new patch that's come out for that specific application there. So appreciate the patience on that one. We'll go back into our agentic workflows here, and we're going to go into coordinate supplier onboarding. Again, we can see that how to instruct that one, the different steps that it is designed to operate based off of. We can see we've got a specific step telling us to interact with the data steward agent first, to then proceed to potentially other instructions based on the outcomes required there as well. At that level, at the top level as well, in the same way that we could duplicate a skill so that we can change that to what we're looking for with our organization, we can also do that with, and again, I'm just making sure I'm in the right scope. In this case, it's going to be my supply operations. Now, we'll come over here and we can see on our right, and we've got it with each of these here, that I can actually duplicate that. So what I might do is deactivate this source one, the one that's come from ServiceNow directly, so that I can duplicate this. And then go in and say, add or create a new AI agent to take the outcome I want to do. So to quickly show that example, what I might do is click create new AI agent. And this is then where we go through the experience of describing our AI agent, what its instructions need to be here as well, and the information of who can use that agent, will it run as that end user, the tools and different information we need to provide to it, so on and so forth. So you can see we've even got some AI here to support the capability of developing these to help us generate the right prompts, the right descriptions and information to get our output there as well. That was a sort of quick demo showing us how we go through and enable those, really highlighting the fact that it is a really smooth and easy process, particularly to start evaluating our out-of-the-box options, but then start introducing your own capabilities and enhancing on top of what we already have in terms of those agentic workflows and agents with your own enterprise-specific capabilities, touching on your own integrations or your own different data there that you have within your platform. What I'm going to do is change back to our presentation now. what we'll do is move on now to our last section here. So next steps in terms of enabling, experimenting, and measuring. So the key thing that I really want to highlight, and I mentioned earlier our ServiceNow University courses, I really want to highlight the fact that we do have these 3 different implementer courses specific to Now Assist. The value of these implementer courses, and again, these are because they're on ServiceNow University, we've got that zero cost there behind them. With these individual courses, you get a lab environment where you can go through the process of enabling these, but then testing and experimenting with those. You can build your own agents, you can build your own skills as well to really learn and apply some of the skills, some of the information that's both in these courses and that I've talked about today. So I really do encourage anybody who is interested, either themselves or other folks within your organizations, to go through and scan these ones to really go through the process and use those environments and evaluate and learn from implementing those as well. Awesome. What I'd like to do now is transition into a Q&A. I would like to do our after poll, but unfortunately those haven't synced through. So again, I really encourage anyone to add the inputs into the chat in terms of any thoughts that you'd like to share, any experiences that you've got with these sort of technologies as well that you'd like to share with the broader group. Really excited to hear from you, as well as any of those questions. Just pulling up the chat and Q&A in the background here. Perfect. I can see no open questions. Alrighty. Wonderful. I think everybody's really excited to get to lunch. I'm not seeing any of those questions in. Do feel free to pass through any questions. Otherwise, I also wanted to extend the opportunity. So if you're interested in starting to use these agentic capabilities, these Gen AI capabilities, really encourage reaching out, of course, to myself or to the broader product success team to really talk more about your journey with those. When going through these experiences, there's a lot to learn and a lot to improve as you go through these processes. So I'm really excited to see how different organizations take these approaches and start to use these technologies. So if you do want to reach out, you can reach out to myself at astrid@servicenow.com. I was lucky enough to just get my first name on the email there, or to the broader team as well. That'll be a close for the webinar today. So thank you very much for joining, for engaging with us through chat and otherwise. I'm really excited to see how everyone goes with these new technologies.